Usually when we think about nationality, it feels like a fixed line on a map, you know? Like it's totally binary.
Right. Yeah, you're born somewhere, you get a passport from there, and that document just tells you exactly who you are and where you belong.
Yeah, it's neat. It's categorized. It's comforting, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It creates this very tangible, straightforward transaction with the state. You pay your taxes, you obey the laws, and the state gives you an identity.
But then, I mean, you look at what is happening right now with Canadian citizenship law, and suddenly that entire map is just completely redrawn.
It really is.
We are looking at a legal landscape that has shifted so dramatically that your very identity might be tied to a place you have, never even visited.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. So welcome to the Deep Dive. If you are joining us, your mission today is to cut through the massive historic shifts in Canadian citizenship law that took effect in 2026.
And there is a lot to cover.
So much. We are decoding the changing rules, the ballooning wait times, and the new realities of becoming Canadian. Right.
And to figure out what this all means for you, we are pulling together everything from official government study guides, like Discover Canada and their physical presence calculator.
Essential tools, really.
Yeah, definitely. Plus recent news reports from CIC News and IRCC.com, and legal breakdowns from Moody's Private Client and the Canada Citizen Center. We want to see where the system is breaking and, where the new loopholes are.
Because the amount of new legislation here is just staggering. And the implications touch literally millions of people across the globe.
Staggering is the word. Because right now, millions of people, especially Americans, by the way, might secretly be Canadian citizens without even knowing it.
Yeah.
And for those applying through normal immigration channels, the finish line has radically changed. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We have to start with the biggest shockwave of them all, which is the new Bill C-3 rules that were implemented on December 15th, 2025.
Right, the removal of the first-generation limit. Exactly. It's almost like discovering a winning lottery ticket hidden inside your grandparents' dusty birth certificate. It's like the government found a massive dead-end pipe in the immigration plumbing from 2009, and they just removed the cap.
That's a really good way to put it. Suddenly, decades of pent-up generational pressure is just flooding the system.
So let's break down who exactly qualifies for this sudden golden ticket. Explain these new rules for us.
Well, to understand the fix, you really have to look at the historical flaw.
Yeah.
Back in 2009, Canada changed its laws to basically cut off citizenship by descent at the first generation born abroad.
Right.
Meaning if you were a Canadian citizen and had a child outside of Canada, that child was Canadian. But if that child grew up and had a baby outside of Canada...
Their chain was broken?
Exactly. The grandchild got nothing.
Which created a whole cohort of people known as lost Canadians, right?
Yes, lost Canadians. People who felt culturally Canadian, maybe had really deep family ties, but were legally completely locked out. So Bill C-3 essentially restores citizenship to thousands of people who were cut off by these older, quirky rules. And there are two main groups getting their status back.
Okay, what's the first group?
The first is what we call the pre-1947 cohort. So before January 1st, 1947, Canadian citizenship didn't legally exist.
Wait, really? It just didn't exist at all?
Nope. People living in Canada were technically British subjects.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah, so when the 1947 Citizenship Act was created, it didn't retroactively apply to people born abroad to Canadian parents before that date. It was a huge blind spot.
I can imagine.
Bill C-3 finally fixes that 80-year-old oversight. If you were born abroad before 1947 to a Canadian parent, you are now retroactively a citizen from birth.
So someone in their 80s today could suddenly find out they have been Canadian their entire life.
Exactly.
That is wild.
It is. But the second group is even larger. These are people born abroad after that 2009 cutoff, whose parents were also born abroad, but who have a Canadian-born anchor grandparent.
An anchor grandparent.
Right. The generational count effectively resets at that Canadian-born grandparent. And this heavily, heavily affects parts of New England.
Why New England specifically?
Well, between 1840 and 1930, hundreds of thousands of French Canadians moved south to work in American mill towns.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they settled down, had families, and basically lost touch with the Canadian state. Under these new rules, if your parent was born in the U.S. to a Canadian-born grandparent, you might qualify.
But wait, doesn't opening the door this wide invite massive fraud?
How so?
Well, if I have a French-sounding last name in Vermont, couldn't I just, like, forge a 1920s baptismal record and claim a Canadian passport? How is the government actually verifying a lineage that goes back 3 generations?
Yeah, the government anticipated that exact vulnerability. The burden of proof is incredibly high, and it sits entirely on your shoulders as the applicant.
Meaning you can't just submit a family tree from Ancestry.com.
Definitely not. As of mid-2026, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, which you will often hear referred to as IRCC.
Right, IRCC.
They updated their guidance to mandate that documents proving your line of descent must come from the original source authority.
Got it. So official paperwork only.
Yes, you need official, state-issued vital records, birth certificates, marriage licenses issued directly from the government entity that originally recorded them.
So if your great-grandparents' birth certificate burned in a municipal fire in 1950,
Which happens?
yeah, and the town hall can't issue a certified copy, you are going to have a very hard time proving your claim.
Exactly. And there is a $75 processing fee for every application, which acts as a minor deterrent for frivolous claims.
So you need an unbroken chain of government paperwork. Let's look at the future, though. What if a child is born after that December 15th, 2025 cutoff?
Okay, yeah.
Let's say an American who just got their citizenship recognized under Bill C-3 has a baby next month in New York. Do they still get to pass on this automatic golden ticket?
What's fascinating here is that the government realized they couldn't create an infinite, endless chain of citizens who have never set foot in Canada.
Right, it dilutes the whole concept of nationality too much.
Exactly. So, for children born or adopted after December 15th, 2025, there is a new substantial connection test.
Wait, a substantial connection test?
Yes.
Does that mean the parent actually has to prove they lived in Canada, like producing tax returns or leases before the baby is born?
They absolutely do. The Canadian parent, who was themselves born abroad, must prove they spent at least 1,095 days physically present in Canada before the birth of the child.
So that's 3 full years.
Yes, 3 full years.
And if they can't prove that?
Then the citizenship doesn't pass on to the new baby. The chain breaks again. The logic here is to anchor the citizenship back to actual lived physical ties to the country rather than just bloodlines.
Which makes sense philosophically.
It does.
But it brings us to a massive practical problem. When you uncap that generational plumbing and millions of people worldwide suddenly realize they might be citizens, what happens to the actual physical system processing these claims?
Oh, the entire administrative system just buckles. You get a massive traffic jam.
100,000-person bottleneck, to be exact.
Yeah. The July 2026 data from IRCC is startling. The queue for proof of citizenship certificates grew exponentially to 99,500 people.
Wow.
Just in the span of 1 month, from June to July, 17,500 new applicants joined the line. Processing times jumped from 15 months to 19 months almost overnight.
And there was a secondary reason for that delay, wasn't there? Like a pause in the system.
Yeah, in June, IRCC actually paused approvals for new citizenship by descent applications entirely.
Really? Just hit pause on everything.
They had to. They needed to review about 6,500 certificates that had already been issued under Bill C-3 to ensure the underlying documentation was solid. They were likely worried about the exact kind of fraud you mentioned earlier.
So did they find people faking their ancestry?
The data shows it was mostly a false alarm, actually. Out of those 6,500, only 100 were flagged for potentially insufficient documentation.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
Not at all. And of those, 33 were quickly reinstated. The remaining 67 are still being resolved, which represents only about 1% of the certificates issued under the new law.
But that pause, combined with the flood of new applications, just pushed the wait times up significantly.
It did.
So what does this all mean? If I'm listening to this and I've got my grandparents' valid Canadian birth certificate in my hand and I see a wait time extending out realistically to February 2028, is it even worth applying right now, or should you just wait a year for the queue to die down?
No, waiting is the absolute worst strategic move you can make.
Really?
Yes, because IRCC uses a forward-looking calculation method for these wait times. They evaluate how many applications are currently waiting, how many staff they have, and the projected incoming volumes.
Okay.
If you apply today, you join the back of a line of 100,000 people. If you wait 6 months, you aren't letting the line die down. You are just letting another 50,000 people get in front of you.
So delaying only guarantees a longer wait later. Get in line now?
Get in line right now. And when a system is this overwhelmed, Officers look for any easy reason to kick an application out and clear their desk.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, case in point, photos.
Photos.
The requirements are incredibly strict. It must be a physical color photo taken within the last 6 months, exactly 50 by 70 millimeters, neutral expression, perfectly lit.
That sounds minor.
It sounds minor, but submitting a photo that is slightly the wrong size is a top reason applications are returned. And that puts you right back at the end of a 19-month line.
Oh, that is brutal. Don't let a bad photo delay you further, people.
Definitely not.
Okay, so this massive influx of descendants is causing a bottleneck, but they aren't the only ones waiting in line. What happens to the traditional immigrants who are already living in Canada watching this queue explode?
Right, because not everyone has a Canadian grandparent.
Exactly. For hundreds of thousands of people currently living in Canada as permanent residents, they are looking at the naturalization process. And Bill C-3 completely rewrote the rulebook on how to count your time in Canada for them, too.
It did. The core requirement for naturalization remains the same, though. You must be physically present in Canada for 1,095 days out of the 5 years immediately preceding your application.
But how you reach that number has changed.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The math is incredibly specific, but there are new rules that look almost like cheat codes, ways that temporary status or even time spent outside of Canada can actually count toward that 1,095-day total.
Yeah, let's look at temporary residence first. If you were in Canada legally on a work permit, a study permit, or as an asylum claimant who received protected person status before you became a permanent resident, that time counts.
But not day for day, right?
No, it counts as half days.
Yeah.
2 days as a temporary resident equals 1 day towards citizenship, up to a maximum of 365 credited days.
Why does the government value that time at exactly 50%? Seems so arbitrary.
It's about permanent intent. When you are a temporary resident, like, say, an international student, you haven't made a permanent legal commitment to stay in Canada. You're transient.
Right.
The government recognizes that you are physically here, contributing to the economy or society, but they discount the time because your official immigration intent wasn't yet permanent.
Makes sense.
And, crucial detail, it only counts if you had legal status. If your study permit expired and you overstayed for a month, those days vanish from the calculation entirely.
Okay, so that's the temporary resident credit. What about time spent outside of Canada? How can the government possibly count time spent in another country as physical presence in Canada?
So under the new Bill C-3 codifications, if you are a permanent resident working abroad for a Canadian company, meaning a business incorporated in Canada or a government entity,
Okay.
or if you are studying abroad as part of a Canadian degree program, those days count. You can claim up to 730 days this way.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. The underlying philosophy is that you are acting as an economic or academic extension of Canada abroad, but you have to prove you maintain substantial ties back home, like keeping a residential lease, bank account, and filing your Canadian taxes.
Obviously, yeah. And there is a new credit for emergencies, too, which feels like a major shift in how the bureaucracy treats people.
Oh, it is a massive philosophical shift. Historically, the law was super rigid.
Like zero exception.
Pretty much. If you left Canada for a 2-week vacation and suffered a heart attack that kept you hospitalized abroad for 6 months, the citizenship clock stopped. You were penalized for a tragedy.
That is so unfair.
Right. Now, there is a discretionary 180-day credit. If you were stuck outside Canada for reasons entirely beyond your control, like a sudden medical emergency or a natural disaster, IRCC officers can credit up to 180 days of that absence toward your physical presence.
It humanizes the statute.
Exactly. But spending long periods abroad does trigger a massive security catch.
Right, the police certificate.
Yes. If during the 4 years before you apply, you spend 183 days or more in a row in any foreign country, you must provide a police certificate from that country.
Because Canada wants to ensure you haven't committed crimes abroad before granting you citizenship.
Precisely.
I'm looking at this math and I'm honestly a bit confused. I know permanent residents also have a residency obligation to keep their PR status active.
I do.
And that obligation is 730 days in a rolling 5-year period. So can a listener just use that same math for their citizenship application? Doesn't hitting that PR threshold just automatically qualify you for citizenship too?
Oh, that assumption traps thousands of applicants every single year.
Really?
Yes. They are entirely separate calculations with different rules. The permanent resident obligation is 730 days in any rolling 5-year window. The citizenship requirement is 1,095 days in the specific 5 years immediately before you sign your application.
Oh, I see.
You can easily meet your permanent residency obligation, but if you spend a lot of time traveling for work in years 4 and 5, you will fail the citizenship calculation.
I don't overlap perfectly.
Not at all. Which is why utilizing the government's official online physical presence calculator before you apply is just non-negotiable.
Good tip. So the math is rigid, but Bill C-3 did offer a huge sigh of relief regarding dual nationality, didn't it?
It did. Canada has technically allowed dual citizenship since 1977, but the law never explicitly spelled it out in plain language. It was framed as an absence of a restriction rather than a protected foundational right.
Which created a lot of anxiety for naturalizing citizens,
Yeah.
especially since some countries like Japan or China automatically strip your citizenship if you naturalize elsewhere. People wondered how Canada viewed their loyalty if they kept their old passport.
Exactly. So, Bill C-3 codified it to end the ambiguity. It now explicitly states in the Citizenship Act that acquiring Canadian citizenship does not require renouncing any other nationality.
That's a huge relief.
And holding another passport does not affect your Canadian status. Furthermore, it states Canada does not recognize foreign laws that try to automatically strip Canadian citizenship.
So from Canada's perspective, once you are Canadian, you are Canadian. The state doesn't care what other passports are in your drawer.
Exactly.
Awesome. So let's say you've done the extreme math. You hit your 1,095 days, you filed your taxes, and you survived the 19-month queue. What does the actual finish line look like?
The final hurdles are really all about integration. If you are an adult between the ages of 18 and 54, you must prove you have an adequate knowledge of English or French.
Okay.
This means hitting CLB Level 4. CLB stands for Canadian Language Benchmarks.
What does level 4 actually measure, though? Does that mean you can write an academic essay in French?
Oh, not at all. Level 4 just measures basic, everyday conversational fluency. It means you can take part in routine conversations, understand simple instructions, and use basic grammar.
Okay, that's not too bad.
You also have to pass a citizenship test covering Canada's history, geography, economy, government, and laws. But if you are 55 or older, the government acknowledges that learning a new language or studying for a historical exam is an undue burden.
So they get a pass.
Yeah, you are exempt from both.
What happens with kids? Do they have to pass the history test?
Minors under 18 don't take the test, but they have different processing tracks depending on their family unit.
Like Section 5.1 versus 5.2.
Exactly. If a minor is applying alongside a Canadian parent, their application is bundled together and the process is heavily streamlined. If a minor is applying alone, without a Canadian parent, it's a separate, more rigorous track to ensure the child actually qualifies independently.
Okay, that makes sense.
And while they don't take the test, minors aged 14 to 17 do have to take the oath of citizenship.
Which brings us to the ceremony. If you are getting your citizenship by descent, that hidden lottery ticket we talked about at the beginning, you skip the ceremony entirely, right?
Right, you just get your certificate in the mail.
But for naturalizing citizens, the ceremony is the grand finale.
It is the exact moment you legally become Canadian.
And the ceremonies themselves have really modernized. As of late 2023, hybrid virtual ceremonies became a permanent fixture.
Yeah, you can literally take the oath from your living room via a laptop webcam.
Which is a massive departure from the traditional image of nation building. But I want to hone in on the oath of citizenship itself, because this is where the history really collides with the present.
It really does.
According to the Discover Canada study guide, applicants swear allegiance to a person King Charles III, rather than a document like a constitution or a flag.
Right, because Canada is a constitutional monarchy. As the guide states, the sovereign is personified by Canada, and Canada is personified by the sovereign.
It is a very different conceptual framework than a republic like the United States.
Totally. You are swearing allegiance to the crown, which represents the state itself.
But the oath isn't just about the king anymore. There was a profound addition made recently.
Yes, in 2021, the government passed Bill C-8, which stemmed directly from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or the TRC.
For those who might not know, the TRC was a massive, multi-year investigation into Canada's residential school system, where Indigenous children were systematically separated from their families.
It was a very dark chapter. And when the TRC concluded in 2015, they issued 94 calls to action, basically a roadmap to redress that legacy and advance reconciliation.
Right.
Call to Action 94 specifically demanded a change to the oath of citizenship. The goal was to ensure that every single new citizen, before they ever get their passport, acknowledges this history and the original inhabitants of the land.
So what does the oath actually mandate now?
All new citizens must now swear to faithfully observe the laws of Canada, including the Constitution, which recognizes and affirms the Aboriginal and treaty rights of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples.
That is a massive shift from a standard oath of allegiance.
Huge shift.
But let me ask you this. What if an applicant has strong personal, historical, or political objections? What if you come from a country with a brutal history of British colonialism and absolutely refuse to swear allegiance to the king?
Yeah.
Or maybe you have political objections to the phrasing around Indigenous rights. Can an applicant opt out or use alternative wording?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of what citizenship represents, the answer is a firm no. There is no alternative wording.
None at all.
None. You cannot opt out. The oath is a mandatory legal requirement and a binding pledge of modern civic duty in Canada. You must recite the official wording exactly as it is prescribed.
So it's non-negotiable.
Taking it, whether you are standing in a traditional hall or looking into a laptop webcam, is the ultimate requirement to cross the threshold.
Wow. Let's briefly recap the sheer scale of what we've talked about today. The Canadian citizenship landscape in 2026 is virtually unrecognizable from a decade ago.
It really is.
We have a newly opened door that allows generations of descendants to reclaim their lost Canadian status, uncapping a genealogical well that dates back to before 1947.
And we have a massive, though mathematically necessary, 19-month waiting queue processing that flood of people.
Right. We have highly specific yet more forgiving math for permanent residents calculating their physical presence, complete with new credits for global emergencies. And finally, a modernized hybrid ceremony with an oath that forces new citizens to acknowledge both the British Crown and Indigenous treaty rights.
It is a system that is simultaneously looking deep into the past to correct historical quirks and pushing into the future with virtual ceremonies and codified dual nationality protections.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder. We talked at the beginning about nationality feeling like a fixed line on a map.
Right.
But if Canadian citizenship can now stretch back across generations, span across international borders without forcing you to give up your other passports, and culminate in a virtual ceremony over a laptop webcam.
How does that fundamentally change what it means to have a national identity in our highly digitized, hyper-connected world?
Exactly.
If you can be deeply connected to a nation and legally recognized by it without ever physically standing on its soil, the definition of belonging is evolving right before our eyes.
It really makes you look at that fixed line on the map differently, doesn't it? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Canadian citizenship. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will see you next time.